Hello and welcome to the Today's Money Masters. I'm Jean-Paul Manu. The Today's Money Masters competition comprises 3 professional investors and a novice, each provided with $500,000 to invest. The participants will invest in stocks, bonds, and collective investment schemes. They will share their strategies over a 1-year period. At the end of the period, the top portfolio manager will be declared. So let's continue with the masters on this very exciting journey. But first, a word from our sponsors. Welcome back. On today's program, we are joined by André Yapp, one of our professionals. He's from the Credit Union Fund Management Company Limited. Welcome back, André.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right. André, let's get right into it. Are you buying into the Caribbean Assurance Brokers initial public offering, IPO, that just came out? Why or why not?
So short answer is no, and the reason for that is that I have not been able to make myself intimately aware with the details of the prospectus. As you can imagine, my time has been pretty much eaten away by the Trans-Jamaica Highway Limited Initial Public Offering. As many people are aware, it's a monstrous 300-page prospectus, so it's pretty much eaten away up a lot of the time. So I haven't really been able to devote the time that is necessary to make myself intimately aware with the details surrounding Caribbean Assurance Brokers to say that I'm comfortably investing or I want to invest. So I have no clue what the company's strategy is. I don't know what the drivers of their income is. I don't know what their past financial performance is. So
it's not that they didn't release any information. It's just the timing of their release of their IPO it coincides too closely with that of Trans-Jamaica.
For me to do an assessment to say,
okay,
I'm jumping in or I'm not jumping in.
Okay.
All right. But separate and apart from that, I've looked at the details surrounding the offer itself. So the offer, essentially, the company is trying to raise about $100 million by issuing 53 million shares. Now, if you look on it on a relative basis over the past 2 years or since the beginning of 2018, that's a very, very small deal, even on junior market terms.
Okay.
So to find a deal smaller than that, you have to go back to iCreate Limited, which had an initial public offering last year, and they raised about $70 million. They were looking to raise about $70 million. So it's a very, very small offer. But that's not to say small is bad, you know? Small things can work as well and get you what you need. So when you think about it now, and you have to break it down a bit more, you look at the allocation. Now the allocation for CAB, as I'll call it, Caribbean Assurance Brokers, the allocation for them for the public is around 16% of the shares are being offered to the public. Now when you look on that on a comparative basis, that's the second smallest allocation that we've seen to the public in 2 years. You'd have to go all the way back to 2018 when Indies Pharma came out, which offered an allocation of 15%. But let's say we're looking at it a bit to not necessarily likewise. So I like to include the shares which are reserved specifically for Mayberry clients to get to the full public allocation, because essentially Mayberry clients are a part of the public. They're a subset of the public. So if you consider that plus the regular public allocation, it's about 23% of the shares. That sounds good, right? Not really when you think of it in terms of dollar terms. In terms of dollar terms, it's still the lowest amount of shares being offered to the public in dollar terms. It's about $25 million worth of shares being offered. Like, there's nothing close to it. I mean, the closest to it would have been, the lab, which offered about $50 million worth of shares to the public when it came out, right? That's 2 times the size of it. Even Indies Pharma, which I said on a percentage basis, it was kind of small as well. It offered 15% to the public. It offered about $60 million worth of shares to the public. So it's a really small allocation when you think of it that way.
Okay.
So you kind of look, well, not you, but I look at it and I say, well, the last Mayberry-led or Mayberry-driven IPO that came out was Lumber Liquidators late last year, and the allocation was about $2,000 worth of shares per investor. So for me, that won't necessarily move the needle, and Mayberry is notorious for giving really small allocations. So it's not necessarily something that would move the needle. And then I look on it in terms of the context of the market. Nobody is really paying attention to CAB right now. I'm surprised that it's not closed as at the time of filming, right? So the fact that it's a small allocation, it's not closed, I haven't necessarily heard a buzz about it because it's kind of competing with Trans-Jamaica Highway Limited, which has all the buzz. Everybody is kind of interested in that one. It kind of is like the little stepchild that gets left behind, so to speak. So all of these translate into me saying, I doubt I'm going to get no returns that I'm trying to get off of that. Okay. So I'm kind of better off holding off until I find something better, which on top of it, I'm intimately aware of the details surrounding it. I've stuck to my investment philosophy of making sure that my investment decision is grounded in research and knowledge and not just jumping on a bandwagon like I did with Jamaica Teas, and we know how that ended.
We know how that ended. Okay, all right, fine. So cab, not for you, but could be for somebody else.
Definitely, it could be for somebody else, could be for an investor who is definitely aware of the intricacies surrounding the company, who have done their research and analysis and as well done their market read, and think they can make something off of it, or it fits their investment philosophy.
All right, let's move on. 3 of the stocks that you hold in your portfolio, JMMB, Cygnus, and Fontana, reported results this week. Are you likely to cut or to buy more of these stocks based on those results?
The earning results from these companies have been overwhelmingly positive, which is great, but I'm not necessarily looking to increase my allocation of funds towards investing in these companies at this time. I think I've allocated a generous amount to those companies, and I'm not necessarily looking to increase my exposure. What I'm hoping will happen as a result of the positive earning results is that we'll be able to see some stock price appreciation, at which point I could probably look to take some profits from them. I think 2 of the 3 of them right now I'm in the money, I'm green. I know 2 of them I'm in the green, which is JMMB and Cygnus. Fontana I'm a little bit in the red, so I'm hoping that that one in particular rebounds, and I'm able to assess the market at that point and see what I can take some gains from and what I need to reassess or I can invest in.
Okay, all right, so you're not going to cut anything necessarily at this point, but you're happy with their performance so far?
Right, I'm happy with the quarterly release.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that one. We'll have more with André Yapp after this quick break. Welcome back. We've been speaking with André Yapp today, one of the participants in the competition from the Credit Union Fund Management Company Limited. André, were there any surprises from the recent financial results released?
For me, not really. I mean, it was pretty much a pretty evenly distributed bell curve in terms of expectations, in that what I expected to perform well, performed well, what I expected not to perform well, didn't, what I expected to really struggled, what I expected to do really well did. There was nothing really, no outliers per se. So everything was within the margin of expectation for me from the earning releases. However, what I found interesting was a press release from iCreate Limited saying that they have managed to raise $24 million in debt through the issuance of a bond this year through arranging by Sagicor. I found that particularly interesting. I wish they had given us a bit more details on it. All they gave us was the amount and the tenure, which is 5 years. The reason why I find it so interesting is because iCreate is, despite being listed less than a year, it's been a company that somewhat underperformed expectation and underperformed its own forecast in its prospectus when it came out. I mean, this is a company that's generated losses in every quarter that it's actually reported. So in the first quarter, it reported losses of $1.5 million. Second quarter, losses of $7.9 million, basically $8 million. Third quarter, $3.2 million. And the fourth quarter, $21.5 million. So
Losses.
Okay. So it's reported losses consistently. These losses, of course, have eaten away at the company's equity to the point where the company now has equity of about 5 million Jamaican dollars. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the performance, and I'm wondering, okay, what is it how did they sell Sagicor or whoever bought this bond on saying, hey, we can turn it around, we can move from the red to the green, or is it, no, the red to the black. There we go. How can we move positive that you can rest assured that we will pay you back? I'm wondering what kind of terms were agreed upon. Were the interest rates high? Was it low? Is it a bullet payment, which basically means that at maturity, the company pays back the entire sum of the principal? Or is it somewhat of an amortizing bond, which means that over time, the company pays back the principal? Kind of, say, just to give you a little bit of assurance, we'll return your money faster as opposed to all the way at the end. So I'm really curious because, as I said, it's not a company that has been doing very well so far. So.
Okay, interesting. Do you expect any significant impact from the budget presentation so far?
I think it would be a little bit premature for me to speculate on anything arising from the budget presentation. Well, not the presentation, but the announcement. We know that the government has essentially announced that the budget of expenditures will be around $850 billion, right? So that's an increase from the previous year when it was about 803. I believe. Yeah, so $803 billion.
Billion with a B.
Yeah, man, with a B. So I know the ordinary mindset is that, oh God, they want more money, they're going to spend more money, that means more taxes. But we can't really put the horse before the carriage in terms of that one, because as we've seen over the past couple of years, the budget has increased every year. So let me just look here. In 2018, 2019, we had a budget of $755 billion compared to the previous year when it was $710 billion. And what happened? What happened in that year? Nothing happened. There was no increased taxation. That was when Audley Shaw was still the Minister of Finance. Last year, we had the budget increase again to the previously, what I previously said, $803 billion from $775 billion. And in fact, what we had last year was a reduction in some of the taxes. Remember, we had a reduction in stamp duty and transfer duty.
Sure.
So an increase in budget does not equal increased taxation.
Necessarily.
Right? Not necessarily.
Okay.
So I think it'd be a bit preemptive for me to try and speculate as to what is going to happen going forward. What I can say is that over the past couple of years, despite the government administration, whether it was the PNP or JLP, what we have seen from the government is that they have been willing, able, and have succeeded in somewhat going through a measured and detailed, somewhat fiscal response. So they've been very fiscally responsible. You know, they haven't overspent, they haven't overtaxed. They've done exactly what is necessary for the economy to move ahead and for Jamaica's fiscal position to improve.
Okay.
Now, compare that to a couple of years ago, not even a couple, probably about a decade ago or more, where what we had was successive governments, regardless of who it was, essentially overspending. So you'd have a budget where you'd probably budget for a deficit of 10 billion. I'm just throwing out arbitrary figures here. And instead, by 5 months or 6 months into the fiscal year, you have exceeded that fiscal government by 5 times. Okay. You have overspent 5 times over half the year's debt.
So there was indiscipline.
There's a bit of indiscipline, bit of overspending, bit of need for us to actually spend on certain things that were necessary and we couldn't avoid.
Right.
But we had those situations and that led us into a debt hole where we had to borrow to fill those gaps.
Sure.
And that's what led us to the position where we needed the IMF help because we couldn't actually borrow anymore. We just couldn't. Nobody would lend us. So kind of goes back to the previous situation I was speaking about. Nobody would be willing to lend you because they think you're too much risk. And we had to have the fiscal discipline going forward where we could actually dig ourselves out of this hole. It's interesting because there's been a publication recently essentially detailing like the conversations and the mindset within the IMF and within Washington previous to us embarking on that IMF agreement about people thinking, well, will this actually work? Can these people actually pull it off? How bad it actually is? You know, people probably taking bets saying, well, they'll fail within 6 months or something like that. Right. Compared to now where there's no such conversation. The conversation is Jamaica is the example. Jamaica is the success story.
Sure.
So all of that stems from fiscal discipline. So I'm confident enough to say that I'll just sit back, wait and see, and assess afterwards. And I think that either way the country will be in a fine state. I know some cynics amongst us will be thinking, well, election coming in us, so some curry goat we have to run going forward. But like I said, let's not be too cynical, let's not be too optimistic or pessimistic. Let's just wait and see. And when the details are ready in Parliament, we'll have the full 100 and we can decide what we're going to do and how best to approach it from there.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that going forward. All right, thank you, Andre.
Thank you much.
Nice to see you. That was André Yapp giving us his financial thoughts this week. Join us next week, same time, for another exciting episode of the Masters Competition as we meet another participant. Follow the pros and the one novice each week here on the Masters Competition. Listen and analyze the strategies with the Masters on Radio Jamaica, Thursdays at 8:45 a.m. as they challenge each other to stay ahead. Also, look out for their portfolios in the Financial Gleaner on Fridays. The Masters Competition is a product of Today's Money Limited, brought to you in partnership with NCB Capital Markets Limited, Money Masters Limited, Credit Union Fund Management Company Limited, Proven Wealth, and the Jamaica Stock Exchange. I'm Jean-Paul Manu. The Masters is another fine product from Today's Money Limited.